Have you ever believed that some people are simply born with iron discipline while you are not? That only a select few, special individuals, can wake up early every morning, pursue their goals relentlessly, and operate at peak performance? If you've ever held that thought, let me tell you a truth. Discipline is not a privilege, and certainly not a genetic gift. It is a skill, a system, a choice that is repeated every single day. None of us wakes up one morning and suddenly becomes a disciplined person. Discipline doesn't strike like a bolt of inspiration. It doesn't ignite from motivational videos on social media. And it doesn't grow from New Year's resolutions that are usually forgotten after a few weeks. What you're looking for, resilience, consistency, the ability to overcome procrastination, already lives within you, and it only takes one small but intentional action to awaken it. Imagine discipline no longer being something you struggle to generate on those rare high energy days, but rather becoming an automatic part of who you are, like brushing your teeth every morning without thought, without force. That is entirely possible. But first, we must dismantle a common misconception that discipline is about having strong willpower. You see, most people think that being disciplined means constantly battling with yourself, that you must grit your teeth and bear it, force yourself to do what you hate, and possess an inner core as hard as steel. But the truth is, willpower is just a match. It flares up quickly, but fades just as fast. True discipline is like a fire pit, slow burning, enduring, and sustained from within. Here's the miracle. You don't need to wait for motivation. You don't need to be superhuman. All you need is a habit, a simple, consistent action that has the power to rewire your nervous system, a habit that can change your brain's structure, change how you respond to the world, and gradually build an entirely new version of yourself. This isn't theory. It's a truth backed by modern neuroscience. Through the mechanism known as neuroplasticity, your brain can be reprogrammed through repeated behavior. Every choice, every action, no matter how small, leaves a trace on your neural map. And over time, those traces become the default highways your brain prefers to travel. If you've ever wondered why you keep hitting snooze, why it's easier to open your phone than open a book, or why you keep promising to start tomorrow, but never do, the answer isn't that you lack ability. It lies in your brain's default system. You're living on autopilot, driven by old habits, by neural pathways that have become all too familiar. And that is precisely why real discipline doesn't begin with inspiration. It begins with an intentional act, so small it cannot fail, yet powerful enough to trigger a deep transformation. That act is called the 2-minute commitment. It sounds simple, almost too simple to be believed. But don't let its simplicity fool you. An action that lasts only 2 minutes a day, if repeated long enough and done the right way, can become a bulldozer that crushes all procrastination barriers in your brain. Think about this. If you tell your brain that today you must run 5 kilometers, write 1,000 words, or complete a major project, it will panic. Your survival instinct will immediately push back against sudden pressure and change. But if you only ask yourself to put on your running shoes or write just one sentence, within 2 minutes, your brain cannot resist. It doesn't perceive a threat. And you've just bypassed your mind's natural defense system. And here's what's fascinating. The moment you act, even if just for 2 minutes, you begin to rewire your brain, you're teaching yourself that action precedes inspiration, not the other way around. That you don't need to feel ready to start, you just need to start, and then the readiness will come. The power of discipline doesn't lie in intensity. It lies in deliberate, consistent repetition without the need for perfection. And if you feel like you're lacking discipline, please don't blame yourself. It might simply be that you're missing one right system to start over from the number 2 minutes a day. You've ever asked yourself, why do I know what's right, but still not do it? Why do I keep procrastinating even though I truly want to change? The answer doesn't lie in a lack of ability or desire. It lies deep within the operating structure of your brain, a system designed for survival, not growth. And that very design is quietly preventing you from living with discipline. The human brain is a masterpiece of nature, but it doesn't care about dreams or long-term goals. It only cares about one thing: safety. Safety in thought, safety in action, and safety in emotion, which means anything that smells of effort, change, or risk, even something as simple as a blank page or a workout, gets labeled by the brain as suspicious and triggers an invisible defense mechanism, autopilot mode. Autopilot is when you hit snooze instead of getting up, when your hand opens your phone instinctively instead of the book you promised yourself you'd read, when you whisper, maybe tomorrow, and tomorrow silently fades into a repeat of today. It's not that you're lazy. It's your nervous system choosing the path of least resistance. And unfortunately, that path is made of old habits, old reactions, even if they lead you nowhere. But here's what you must remember. The brain can change. The mechanism known as neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, allows you to create new connections, new mental highways if you know how. Every action you repeat becomes a groove, and over time, it turns into the highway your brain prefers. Bad habits become defaults simply because they're repeated. But for that same reason, a new habit, no matter how small, can gradually overreach the entire system if you stay consistent. And this is when you need a bulldozer to break through those well-worn mental tracks, not through brute force or military-style discipline, but with an action so small the brain has no chance to resist, yet powerful enough to spark deep transformation from within. The 2-minute action. When you allow yourself to just put on your shoes, write one sentence, stand up from your chair, or silence notifications for 2 minutes, you're not merely doing something small. You are interrupting the default stream. You are pulling the brain out of autopilot and beginning to take back control. This is the first step toward becoming a disciplined person, not through pressure, but through deep understanding of your own nature. When you understand that the problem isn't laziness, but a nervous system that hasn't been properly programmed, you begin to forgive yourself. And when you start to change, not from sudden bursts of inspiration, but from small, consistent actions, you gradually escape the greatest trap blocking discipline, the habit of living on autopilot. You are no longer swept away by instinct. You begin to live with intention. And that is where true discipline begins. Let's be honest. You don't lack goals. You've wanted to be stronger, smarter, wealthier, more disciplined. You've made lists, written plans, even set your alarm clock earlier. But something still held you back. An invisible force stopped you before you could even begin, or made you give up after just a few days. That force is procrastination. Not laziness, but the feeling of being overwhelmed from the very first thought. And if there's one thing that can pierce through that wall, one tiny glitch that removes procrastination's reason to exist, it is the 2-minute system. It sounds almost too simple to believe. How could anyone change their life with just 2 minutes a day? But it is precisely in that simplicity where the key lies, where you outsmart the brain's defense mechanisms. Because when you tell yourself, you have to run 5 kilometers every morning or write 1,000 words a day, your brain senses threat. It senses energy drain, and it pushes back, offering a dozen reasonable excuses for why you shouldn't do it. But if all you ask is to put on your shoes or write a single sentence or sit still for 2 minutes, it has no reason to resist. You've passed through the first door. And once the door is cracked open just slightly, you're no longer standing outside, you've stepped in. That's when real motivation begins to form, not from emotion, but from action itself. The 2-minute habit helps you act first, then inspiration will follow. You no longer wait to feel ready because you realize no one is ever truly ready for change. The successful ones are those who act even when they're not ready. What makes this system so powerful is that it leaves no room for failure. 2 minutes is too short to make excuses, too easy not to do, and too simple to procrastinate. You don't need to win at life in a single day. You just need to win against yourself in 120 seconds. And each of those small wins, repeated consistently, teaches your brain you are someone who takes action, not someone who only thinks, dreams, and gives up. Imagine marking an X on your calendar every day. 1 X for every time you complete your 2-minute action. Day after day, those X's become proof that you can trust yourself. Not because you accomplished something grand, but because you kept the smallest promise to yourself every day. And self-trust, once built, becomes the unshakable foundation of a disciplined life. The 2-minute system doesn't ask you to be great. It only asks you to show up. It doesn't need you to change the world today. It only needs you to begin. And sometimes the best way to overcome a massive wall isn't to smash through it, but to find the smallest crack and slip through. The 2-minute system is that crack, small, simple, but powerful enough to pull you out of the old loop and lead you into an entirely new way of living. We often underestimate the small things because in a world of achievements and spotlight, people tend to talk about results, not the very first steps, wobbly and seemingly insignificant. But it is exactly those insignificant steps that form the root of true transformation, not because they're grand, but because they're repeated. Do you want to know what 2 minutes a day can truly change? Let's begin with Sarah, a single mother working 2 jobs, barely having any energy left for herself. She once dreamed of starting an online store, but always thought, I don't have time, I don't have money, I don't have experience. But then she tried something small. Every day, she would write down one product idea. It took less than 2 minutes. A month later, she chose one idea to research further. Again, just 2 minutes a day. Bit by bit, she taught herself how to build a website. The same way, 1 year later, Sarah had her own store, earning 6 figures. Not because of a miracle, but because she didn't quit after the first 2 minutes. Then there's James, a man who once hated the way his body looked in the mirror. He had tried everything, strict dieting, intense workouts, but nothing stuck until he committed to one single push-up each morning, taking less than 10 seconds. Not 100, just one. That one push-up lasted for 30 days, then naturally turned into 5. Half a year later, it was 30. 1 year later, James had lost 22 kilograms and completed his first marathon. One push-up didn't change his physique, but it rewired his nervous system, transforming him from a procrastinator into a man of action. You might think these are exceptional cases, but they're not. They had no more advantages than you, except one. They started, and they didn't stop. Maria, a primary school teacher, had abandoned her passion for painting due to the fast pace of life until one day she decided to draw just a single stroke on canvas each evening. Just one stroke. Gradually, it became a picture, then a habit, then a reignited passion. 1 year later, she held her first art exhibition. One brushstroke may not say much, but repeating it brought her buried identity back to life. Or David, a man in debt, miserable in his job, wanting to learn coding, but always thinking, I'm not smart enough. He began by writing one line of code each morning, just one line. No projects, no pressure, no expectations. 1 year later, he had his own project. 2 years later, he switched into tech with triple his previous salary. What changed wasn't just a job, it was his entire perception of his own ability. These people aren't superheroes. They weren't born disciplined. They simply understood if they did one small thing every day, they were laying one brick for the house of their future. And they kept laying those bricks until even they were amazed by what they had built. You might think 2 minutes isn't enough to change your life, but the truth is, it doesn't need to change your whole life right away. It only needs to change you, day by day, because when the person changes, the results become inevitable. Once you've understood the power of the 2-minute action, What you need next isn't a burst of inspiration. It's a system so simple you can't fail, a compact structure, yet strong enough to carry you far. Because success never starts with greatness. It begins with what you can sustain. And once built properly, that system will no longer rely on willpower, but entirely on intentional repetition. Step 1, choose one single goal. Just one. Don't try to change everything at once. Don't set 5 goals and hope to maintain them all. When you focus on one thing, you're channeling all your energy and conscious attention exactly where it matters most. It could be health, learning, skill, finance, but it must be only one. Simplifying the goal is also a way to make your action clearer. Step 2, define the most specific 2-minute action related to that goal. No vagueness, no symbolic gestures, not something like exercise, but put on running shoes. Not study English, but read one sentence. Not write a book, but write one sentence. The requirement, it must be so small that you can't make an excuse to skip it. If you read the action and think, oh, that's too easy, I could do it right now, then you're on the right track. Step 3, attach that action to a specific time in your day. Not whenever I'm free, but right after brushing my teeth or before making coffee or just before bed. When a new habit is anchored to an existing one, it has a much higher survival rate. This is how a new habit doesn't rely on memory, but becomes a natural reflex. Step 4, record every time you complete the action. A piece of paper, a notebook, an app, any tool that lets you see the repetition. Every time you finish your 2-minute task, mark an X. And you'll be surprised how quickly you become addicted to that mark. Because the X isn't just proof of the action, it's proof that you're keeping a promise to yourself. You're teaching your mind, I am someone who does what I say. You don't need a detailed plan. You don't need loads of free time. You don't need special resources. You only need to systematize the smallest thing you can sustain daily. And the best part is, you don't need to be perfect to start. But you do need to start in order to become consistent. There's no pressure in this system, only clarity and a short promise repeated daily. Remember, the system wasn't created for you to perform. It was created to help you stay in motion on the days when there's no inspiration, no motivation, no one watching. And it is on those days that you'll understand it's not the big goals that determine success, but how seriously you treat the smallest action. Remember, the system wasn't created for you to perform. It was created to help you stay in motion on the days when there's no inspiration, no motivation, no one watching. And it is on those days that you'll understand it's not the big goals that determine success, but how seriously you treat the smallest action. Anyone can do the right thing when everything is going well. When you're full of energy, when your mood is good, when time is abundant, staying disciplined isn't all that hard. But real life doesn't operate that way. There will be days when you're drained by pressure. There will be mornings when you don't want to get out of bed. There will be moments when you just want to push everything aside and tell yourself it's okay to skip a day. And it is on those days that you face the real test of discipline. The question isn't, can you do it when everything is perfect? The question is, can you keep your promise to yourself when nothing is perfect? This is when the 2-minute system reveals its greatest value, because it doesn't require you to be ready. It doesn't demand that you feel positive. It doesn't wait for you to be in an ideal state. It only asks you to show up for exactly 2 minutes. When you're tired, 2 minutes is still doable. When you're stressed, 2 minutes isn't a burden. When you don't even believe in yourself, 2 minutes is still enough to prove that you haven't given up. Not because it's grand, but because it leaves no room for excuses. The 2-minute action is the final thread that keeps you connected to your goal during the moments you're most likely to quit. And once you hold on to that thread, you haven't lost your discipline. You're simply walking through a difficult day. There's a subtle truth in this system that few notice. You don't need to do it well. You just need not to let fatigue become the excuse that breaks you. You can still do the smallest thing in the worst mood, and that's enough to keep yourself from returning to square one. Progress made in silence, in slowness, in exhaustion is what builds true resilience. Because the miracle doesn't lie in inspiration, but in your ability to keep acting despite your emotions. A simple action, repeated when you feel like doing nothing at all, is exactly where you build the stronger version of yourself. True discipline is not born from joy. It is forged in difficulty. And every time you complete a 2-minute action on your hardest day, you plant a powerful message into your brain. I am not someone who acts only when it's easy. I am someone who still acts even when it's hard. That message, when repeated, will gradually shape a new identity. You are no longer the person who gives up easily, who's led by emotions or controlled by circumstances. You become a person of action, regardless of the weather outside or the storm within. And that is what truly sets you apart. The 2-minute action is not about helping you go faster. It's about helping you not stop. Because in the game of discipline, the winner is not the one who takes the longest strides. It's the one who still takes steps, even slowly, on the days when all that remains is sheer perseverance. There's a common misconception in the journey of self-development that discipline is something you possess, like a tool. But the truth runs deeper. Discipline isn't just an action you take, it's an identity you're building. And the 2-minute system, humble in appearance, is the gateway to a profound transformation where you no longer try to live with discipline, but become someone who naturally lives that way. You won't notice it on the first day, not even in the second week, but there will come a moment, perhaps early in the morning as you write a single sentence, or late in the afternoon as you put on your walking shoes, and you'll suddenly realize, I'm doing this without forcing myself. No more internal struggle, no more overthinking. The action has become a part of you. Like brushing your teeth, like drinking water. It's no longer a task, it's a habit. No longer an effort, it's who you are. When you act consistently every day, even for just 2 minutes, you're not merely forming a new habit. You're sending your brain a consistent signal. This is who I am. And like a sophisticated learning machine, your brain records, reinforces, and automates it. The basal ganglia, the region that governs repeated behaviors, begins to register the 2-minute action as a default. You no longer need to remember, decide, or wrestle internally. You just do it. That's when you understand motivation comes after, but identity is what leads behavior. You act not because you feel excited, but because you believe, I am someone who keeps promises to myself. I am someone who doesn't quit. I am someone who always begins, no matter how small, no matter how slow. And that belief, nurtured through the quiet completion of the smallest daily action, becomes a mental stronghold that shields you from temptation, procrastination, and doubt. It's fascinating. When your identity changes, the outside world changes too. You start to see yourself differently, and so do others. Those seemingly invisible 2-minute actions begin to produce visible results. A stronger body, sharper skills, better work performance, clearer relationships. But more deeply, you begin to feel a very special kind of freedom. The freedom of self-mastery. No need for pressure, no deadlines, no need to prove anything. You act because you know you are worthy of a better version of yourself, and you are becoming that version day by day. It's not a lofty goal, it's the reality you're living. And every X you mark on your habit tracker is the evidence you are changing, not through force, but through voluntary, steady, and resilient choice. Eventually, you'll look back and no longer see yourself as someone who's trying to be disciplined, because when discipline becomes part of your identity, you don't have to start over. You only need to keep going. If you've made it here, if you've reached these final lines of this journey, then somewhere inside you, a voice is likely beginning to whisper, soft but clear, I want to begin again. And if that's true, pause for a few seconds, be still, and let me say this, not as a reminder, but as a confirmation. You don't need to do anything grand to change your life. You only need to do something very small and begin today. We often mistakenly believe that to change, we need to start an inner revolution. We think we need a perfect plan, that we must wait for more time, less pressure, or someone to do it with us. But the truth is, life doesn't wait for ideal conditions. And if you keep waiting to be ready, you may be waiting a very long time, maybe forever. No one wakes up one morning and suddenly becomes disciplined, but many people have become disciplined simply by acting for 2 minutes a day. Let me repeat, not 2 hours, not 20 minutes, just 2 minutes. It may sound small, but what you're building isn't a result, it's an identity. In those 2 minutes, you won't finish a book, but you become someone who has started writing. You won't become healthy overnight, but you become someone who no longer makes excuses to avoid taking care of their body. You won't succeed instantly, but you plant the seed for a version of yourself who takes action, keeps promises, and knows they deserve to live differently. If you're thinking, what can just 2 minutes really change? That very thought is the biggest barrier keeping you stuck in place. Every journey begins with the first step, but most people don't fail because they move too slowly. They fail because they never take that first step. And 2 minutes is the small bridge that leads you out of the swamp of procrastination, doubt, and vague expectations. It's a bridge you can absolutely cross today. So if there's one thing you need to do after reading this, let it be this simple. Choose one goal you've been putting off for far too long. Write it down. Then write down the smallest action you can take toward it in 2 minutes. And do it tonight, before you go to sleep. Don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for someone to validate you. All it takes is you in 2 minutes with a promise to yourself. That action might be so small that no one else sees it. But you will know, and you are the one who needs to know, because from that moment on, you're no longer just a dreamer. You become a doer. From that moment on, you stop watching life from the outside. You step in, you engage, and you shape it. With your persistence, one line of code each morning, one sentence written each night, one push-up, one page, one brush stroke, one note. Each small act etches into your nervous system an unshakable message. I am someone who lives with discipline. I am someone who begins and if you can hold on to that day after day, you'll wake up one morning and realize you are no longer who you used to be. Not because you changed overnight, but because you chose not to quit. Each day, for just 2 minutes, that's no longer a habit, that's identity. No longer effort, that's essence. I don't know where you are in life right now. Maybe you're in crisis, maybe you're stuck, maybe you're exhausted looking for a sign. Then let this be your sign. Don't wait another day. You don't need a grand promise, just a small act. 2 minutes. Start today. I wish you courage. The courage to simplify, the courage to let go of perfection, the courage to do the smallest thing, but to do it every day. And then, I believe, you'll be amazed at yourself. Because everything you've been looking for, change, consistency, growth, has always been within you. It's simply been waiting for a signal. And today's 2 minutes might be all it takes to awaken it. So begin. Be you in the version that no longer delays.